The battle raged on, and as the fighting intensified, Zarek found himself face to face with a human officer. The man sneered, raising his weapon, but Zarek was quicker. With a swift motion, he disarmed the officer, sending him sprawling to the ground. But in that moment of triumph, Zarek was struck from behind, a sharp pain searing through his side. Stumbling, he turned to see a human soldier grinning at him, ready to strike again. Just as the soldier lunged, a figure blurred past Zarek. It was Ilyana, her spear thrusting forward, catching the soldier off guard. He fell, and Zarek could only watch in awe as Ilyana's fierce determination lit up the battlefield. "Zarek," she called, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to fall back. Regroup with the others." With a nod, Zarek gritted his teeth against the pain and moved to join her. They dodged and weaved through the fighting, the air thick with the sounds of battle. As they reached their comrades, Zarek took a moment to catch his breath, glancing around to assess their situation. "Is everyone accounted for?" Sarah asked, her face etched with concern. "We need to retreat to higher ground," Ilyana declared, her expression serious. "We can regroup and launch a counterattack from there. We won't let their numbers overwhelm us." Zarek's heart raced as he considered their options. The chaos of battle continued to swirl around them, but he knew they had to act quickly. "Let's move," he shouted, leading the charge as they fought their way to the nearby ridge. As they reached the higher ground, Zarek looked back at the battlefield. The humans were relentless, but so were they. He felt the weight of their struggles pressing on his shoulders, but he refused to let despair take hold. Together, they had come this far, and they would not back down now. In that moment of uncertainty, Zarek found his resolve. They would fight together, no matter the cost. And as the dawn approached, illuminating the battlefield with its first light, they prepared for the final stand against their enemies. Together, he whispered to himself, "We will not be defeated." As the sun rose, hope ignited within him. The dawn of reckoning had arrived, and with it, the promise of a brighter future. The rise of the shock troopers. In the year 2528, humanity had become a formidable force in the galaxy. Earth was no longer just a small planet in a vast universe. It was a hub of advanced technology, exploration, and military might. The people of Earth had pushed the boundaries of science and innovation, creating ships that could traverse the stars and weapons that could level entire cities. Among the most elite of these military units were the Death World Shock Troopers, a group of soldiers known for their incredible bravery and relentless fighting spirit. Captain Alex Carter stood at the edge of the training grounds, his heart pounding with anticipation. The sun blazed overhead, casting a warm glow on the massive training complex. He watched as recruits of all backgrounds worked tirelessly, their bodies glistening with sweat. Some were tall and muscular, while others were shorter and leaner. But they all shared a common goal: to become shock troopers, the elite defenders of Earth. Alex had joined the shock troopers 3 years ago. He remembered the day vividly when he received the call to enlist. It was a moment that changed his life forever. The recruiting officer had looked him in the eye and said, "You have the heart of a warrior, Alex. We need people like you." Those words had ignited a fire within him, and he knew he had to rise to the challenge. As the recruits finished their morning drills, Alex called them to gather around. "Listen up, everyone," he shouted, his voice booming across the yard. "Today, we face our biggest challenge yet. We're not just training to be soldiers. We're training to protect our home from those who wish to destroy it." The recruits listened intently, their eyes filled with determination. They had all heard the rumors about the Kryn, a fierce alien race that had recently begun encroaching on human territory. Tales of their brutality sent shivers down the spine of even the bravest warrior. The Kryn were known to be ruthless, attacking without warning and showing no mercy. The news of their advances spread like wildfire, fueling a sense of urgency among the ranks of Earth's defenders. Among the recruits was Mia, a skilled fighter with a background in engineering. She had always dreamed of being a part of something bigger than herself. "I want to show the galaxy that humans are not just mindless beasts," she said one day during training. "We are intelligent, we are resourceful, and we will fight for our survival." As the weeks passed, the training grew more intense. The recruits faced obstacle courses that tested their physical limits, learned to navigate complex battle simulations, and honed their marksmanship skills. They fought together, laughed together, and struggled through exhaustion together. Every day brought new challenges, but they pushed each other to be better. One afternoon, while practicing hand-to-hand combat, a fight broke out between two recruits. They were both fierce competitors, each wanting to prove their strength. Alex stepped in quickly, separating them before things escalated. "This is not how shock troopers behave," he scolded. "We fight together, not against each other. We are a team, and teamwork is what will save us in the field." The recruits nodded, understanding the importance of unity. From that moment on, they began to forge strong bonds, becoming more than just soldiers. They became a family. They shared their fears, dreams, and hopes for the future. Each person in the group had their unique skills, and Alex made it a point to ensure everyone knew their value. As training continued, news from the front lines grew increasingly alarming. The Kryn had begun launching raids on nearby colonies, leaving destruction in their wake. Reports described entire settlements decimated and countless lives lost. The urgency to complete their training intensified, and Captain Alex felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew that the shock troopers would soon be called into action. One day, during a training exercise, a holographic message interrupted their routine. It was General Thompson, a stern but respected leader of the Earth Defense Force. "Attention, shock troopers. We have received word that the Kryn are preparing for a major offensive. Your training will soon come to an end, and you will be deployed to the front lines. Prepare yourselves. Humanity's fate may rest in your hands." The announcement sent a wave of mixed emotions through the group. Excitement, fear, and determination coursed through them. They had trained for this moment, but the reality of battle weighed heavily on their hearts. Alex gathered his squad after the message. "We may be scared, but we will not back down. We are humans, and we have always found a way to survive. Trust in your training and trust in each other." As the days flew by, the recruits focused on perfecting their skills, their spirits unwavering. They understood that they would soon be facing the Kryn, and they were ready to fight for their home. The bond they had formed would be their greatest weapon. Finally, the day came when they were to board the ships for deployment. As they stood in formation, ready to leave for the front lines, Captain Alex looked at each of his squad members. "Today, we become more than just shock troopers. We become legends. Remember, we fight not just for ourselves, but for every person back home. Let them know that humans are not to be underestimated." With hearts full of courage and a fierce determination to protect their world, the Death World shock troopers embarked on their journey, ready to face the challenges ahead and prove that they were indeed more than just space orcs. They were humanity's last line of defense. However, as the sun set, casting long shadows in the hall, an air of seriousness hung over them. They all knew that their time to fight was approaching, and the reality of the Kryn threat weighed heavily on their minds. One day, during a rare moment of downtime, Alex called for a meeting. He wanted to prepare his team for what lay ahead. "Listen up, everyone. We may be preparing for war, but that doesn't mean we can't strategize. Knowledge is just as important as physical strength. We need to understand our enemy." He gathered maps and data on the Kryn, detailing their strengths, weaknesses, and battle tactics. They are ruthless and strong, but they also have vulnerabilities. "Let's study their patterns and find ways to exploit them," he instructed. The recruits leaned in, focused on the information. They took notes and asked questions, demonstrating their commitment to becoming the best soldiers they could be. Mia, with her keen analytical mind, suggested, "What if we create divergent tactics? If we can distract them, we might catch them off guard." The room buzzed with excitement as they brainstormed ideas, each recruit contributing their unique perspectives. As the training intensified, Alex pushed them harder, knowing that their lives depended on being prepared. They practiced drills late into the night, honing their skills until they were second nature. The recruits developed a sense of urgency. They wanted to be ready for anything the Kryn could throw at them. The day finally arrived when General Thompson summoned the shock troopers for a briefing. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Alex could feel the excitement and tension among the recruits. They were ready to prove themselves. As they entered the briefing room, the general stood at the front, his expression serious. "Troopers, you have trained hard for this moment. The Kryn are not just enemies. They are a threat to our very existence. Your mission is to defend our colonies and protect our people." Alex looked around at his squad, each one filled with determination. They had come a long way from their first day of training, and now they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. They were no longer just recruits. They were warriors. With a newfound sense of purpose, the Death World shock troopers prepared for their mission. They had trained for this, fought for this, and now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. Together, they would prove that they were more than just space orcs. They were the defenders of Earth, ready to fight for their home and each other. The call to battle. The air buzzed with tension as the Death World shock troopers prepared for their first real mission. Captain Alex Carter stood at the front of the assembly area, scanning the faces of his squad. He could see determination in their eyes, but also a hint of anxiety. This was it, the moment they had trained for. Today, they would face the Kryn. The briefing room was filled with the low hum of conversation, each recruit sharing their thoughts on the mission ahead. Alex raised his voice to quiet the crowd. "Troopers, today we put our training to the test. We are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every human who relies on us. The Kryn threaten our very way of life, and we will not back down." The recruits nodded, their spirits lifting as they listened to their captain's words. Alex continued, "We are deploying to the colony on Cerberus IV. Intelligence reports indicate that the Kryn have launched an offensive to take control of the planet. Our job is to secure the area and protect the civilians. We are their shield." Mia, standing next to Alex, felt a surge of adrenaline. She had worked tirelessly to improve their technology, and now it was time to put it to use. "We've got this, Captain. We're ready," she said, her voice steady. With the briefing concluded, the recruits moved swiftly to their transport ships, their hearts pounding in unison. Each trooper was equipped with advanced armor and weapons, feeling the weight of their gear but also the strength it provided. As they boarded, Alex took a moment to look around. This was his team, his family, and he would do everything in his power to keep them safe. The ships roared to life, and the atmosphere inside was charged with excitement and fear. They launched into the sky, heading toward Cerberus IV, a lush planet now shadowed by the threat of war. As they flew, Alex took the opportunity to speak to his team, encouraging them to focus and prepare for what lay ahead. "Remember your training. Stick to your positions and communicate. We're going to be relying on each other out there," he emphasized. The troopers nodded, their resolve solidifying. When they arrived over Cerberus IV, the sight was striking. The planet was covered in greenery, but smoke billowed from several areas, and the sounds of distant explosions echoed through the atmosphere. As the transport ships descended, the reality of the situation hit them like a wave. War was no longer a training exercise. It was here, and it was real. The ships landed with a thud, and the ramp lowered to reveal a chaotic scene. The air was thick with the smell of burning vegetation and the sound of gunfire. The recruits poured out, weapons at the ready, as Alex led the charge. "Move out. Secure the perimeter." The squad moved swiftly, navigating through the dense underbrush. their training kicking in. They formed a defensive line, scanning for any signs of enemy movement. "Stay sharp," Mia called out as they pushed forward, her mind racing with calculations and strategies. Suddenly, they heard the unmistakable sound of Kryn war cries piercing the air. A wave of armored aliens surged toward them, their grotesque forms a stark contrast to the lush surroundings. Adrenaline surged through the troopers as they took their positions, ready to defend their ground. "Fire!" Alex shouted, and the troopers opened fire, their weapons unleashing a torrent of energy blasts. The air crackled with energy as the first wave of Kryn fell, but more were coming. The troopers fought with everything they had, using their training to outmaneuver the enemy. Mia focused on her surroundings, spotting an enemy sniper hidden in the trees. "Captain, we have a sniper at 2 o'clock," she yelled, pointing toward the tree line. Without hesitation, Alex directed a couple of troopers to flank the position, working together to eliminate the threat. As the battle raged on, Alex felt the weight of leadership pressing down on him. He needed to keep his squad focused and motivated. "We're not just fighting for this planet, we're fighting for our future," he called, rallying the troops. Their spirits lifted, and they pressed on, each one pushing their limits. In the heat of battle, Mark, who had previously struggled with his confidence, found himself standing shoulder to shoulder with Mia. As they took cover behind a fallen log, Mark noticed her focused demeanor. "How do you stay so calm?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "I trust in our training and in you. We've prepared for this moment," Maya replied, glancing over the log to take aim at an approaching group of Kryn. "Just keep your head down and follow my lead." With renewed determination, Mark nodded, ready to face whatever came next. They worked together, using their skills to take down enemies, each small victory fueling their confidence. As the battle progressed, the shock troopers fought valiantly, slowly pushing back the Kryn forces. They utilized tactics they had practiced, working as a cohesive unit, but the enemy was relentless, and the losses on both sides began to mount. In a critical moment, a group of Kryn broke through their lines, and Alex quickly sprang into action. "Fall back. Regroup," he commanded, directing his team to retreat to a more defensible position. The troopers followed his orders, forming a tight perimeter to protect one another. As they regrouped, Maya noticed a civilian trapped in the chaos. "We can't leave them," she exclaimed, pointing to the terrified figure cowering behind debris. Without hesitation, she started to move toward the civilian. "Wait, it's too dangerous," Alex shouted, but Mia was already sprinting forward. She couldn't leave anyone behind. The troopers watched, torn between protecting their squad leader and rescuing an innocent life. Mia reached the civilian just as a group of Kryn surged forward. She quickly grabbed the person, pulling them behind cover. "This way. Follow me," she urged, leading them back toward the squad. With her actions, the squad was reminded of their purpose: to protect and serve. Inspired by Mia's bravery, they fought harder, fending off the advancing Kryn. Together, they formed a barrier around the civilian, determined to keep them safe. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tide began to turn. The shock troopers pushed back the Kryn, securing the area around them. As the last of the aliens retreated, cheers erupted among the recruits. "We did it! We held the line!" Mark shouted, a grin spreading across his face. Alex, breathing heavily, looked at his team with pride. "You all fought bravely today. This is just the beginning. We've shown that we can stand against the Kryn, and together, we will win this war." As they regrouped and tended to the wounded, the reality of their victory settled in. They had fought hard, but the war was far from over. Each trooper understood that the battles ahead would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. But for now, they celebrated their first victory, united and stronger than ever. Into the abyss. The victory on Cerberus IV was just the beginning, but it came with its own set of challenges. As the Death World shock troopers regrouped and tended to the wounded, the reality of their mission began to set in. The Kryn had been pushed back for now, but intelligence suggested that their main force was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. Captain Alex Carter called a meeting to assess their next steps. The room was filled with the sound of murmuring recruits, their faces showing a mix of exhaustion and determination. Alex stood at the front, his expression serious. "Listen up, troopers. While we held the line today, we know the Kryn are regrouping. Our victory on Cerberus IV was significant, but we can't afford to become complacent. We need to strike while they are still reeling from their losses. Our next target is their supply base on the outskirts of this sector," he explained, looking each of his team members in the eye. Mia, who had earned respect for her quick thinking in the previous battle, raised her hand. "Captain, do we have any intel on the defenses around the supply base? We need to know what we're up against." Alex nodded, acknowledging her question. "Good point, Mia. Our scouts report that the Kryn are heavily fortified, and we can expect strong resistance. We will need to approach this mission with caution." The troopers listened intently as Alex outlined the plan. They would divide into two teams, one to create a distraction at the front gate while the other would flank from the side, aiming to take the base by surprise. Each team would have specific roles, utilizing their strengths to ensure success. After the meeting, the squad dispersed to prepare for the mission ahead. Mia spent hours fine-tuning their equipment, ensuring that everything was in peak condition. She had a knack for mechanics, and her work had become vital to the squad's success. Meanwhile, Alex took a moment to reflect on the battles they had fought together. He felt proud of his squad, but he also knew that the challenges ahead would only get tougher. The camaraderie they had built was strong, but he could sense the growing pressure on each of them. They were facing a relentless enemy, and the stakes were high. As dawn broke, the shock troopers gathered for their final briefing before the operation. Alex stood before them, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Today, we go into the heart of enemy territory. Remember your training, trust each other, and we will come out on top. Let's show the Kryn that we are not to be underestimated." The troopers shouted their approval, their spirits lifted as they set out toward the supply base. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. As they approached the enemy stronghold, Alex felt a rush of adrenaline. He signaled for the distraction team to move into position, their role crucial for the plan's success. The tension was palpable as they set up their equipment and prepared for the signal. Mia, positioned in the flank team, double-checked her weapon and glanced at Mark, who looked a bit anxious. "Remember, we've got each other's backs. Stay focused, and we'll get through this," she reassured him. "Yeah, I know. I just can't shake this feeling," Mark replied, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Just keep your head in the game." "We're trained for this," Maya replied, trying to instill confidence in him. The signal was given, and the distraction team launched their assault, creating chaos at the front gate. Explosions rocked the area, smoke rising into the sky. The Kryn scrambled to respond, leaving their flanks vulnerable. "Now's our chance. Move out," Alex commanded, and the flank team sprinted toward the supply base, their hearts pounding in rhythm with their footsteps. As they neared the base, the sounds of battle echoed around them. The clash of metal and cries of the wounded filled the air. The shock troopers moved swiftly, using the terrain to their advantage, navigating through the chaos. They soon found themselves at the side entrance of the base. Alex signaled for silence as they approached. Peering around the corner, he saw a group of Kryn guards stationed nearby, unaware of their presence. "On my mark," he whispered, assessing the situation. 3, 2, 1, go." The troopers burst into action, taking down the guards before they could react. The element of surprise was on their side, and they quickly moved inside the supply base, the adrenaline fueling their every move. Once inside, Mia took point, using her technical skills to disable security systems and gain access to critical areas. We need to find their supply depot and destroy their resources, she urged, leading the way. As they moved deeper into the base, they encountered more resistance. The Kryn were regrouping, and the shock troopers found themselves in a fierce firefight. Alex fought alongside his team, issuing commands and ensuring everyone stayed in formation. The battle raged on, and for every Kryn they took down, two more seemed to take their place. Just when it felt like they were getting overwhelmed, Maya spotted a central control panel. "If I can get to that panel, I can shut down their defenses," she shouted above the noise. "Go for it. We'll cover you," Alex replied, rallying the squad to provide cover fire. Mia dashed toward the panel, dodging enemy fire as she reached it. Her fingers flew over the controls, working as quickly as possible to disable the systems. The sounds of battle faded into the background as she focused on the task at hand. Come on," she muttered to herself, sweat beading on her forehead. Just as she was about to give up hope, the screen flashed green, indicating that she had succeeded. "Got it. Their defenses are down," Mia yelled, a surge of triumph washing over her. With their defenses disabled, the shock troopers surged forward, overwhelming the remaining Kryn. The tide of battle had turned in their favor, and they pushed deeper into the supply base, destroying weapons caches and critical supplies as they went. Finally, they reached the heart of the supply depot, where crates of ammunition and explosives were stacked high. Alex glanced at Mia, a determined look in his eyes. "Let's finish this," he said. They set charges on the crates, and as they prepared to leave, Mark looked back at the supplies. "Are we really going to blow this up? What if we could use some of this against the Kryn? We'll take what we can later. Right now, we need to destroy it," Alex insisted. They couldn't risk the supplies falling into enemy hands. As they exited the depot, Alex activated the charges. "Get clear," he shouted, and the team sprinted away just as the explosives detonated behind them, sending a shockwave through the base. The explosion marked a decisive victory, but as the dust settled, Alex knew this war was far from over. They had struck a blow against the Kryn, but they would return, and next time, they would be ready. The shock troopers regrouped outside, cheers erupting as they celebrated their hard-fought victory. They had proven themselves once more, but Alex felt the weight of the battle still to come. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged in the fires of war, and they would fight for each other until the very end. A new threat emerges. The dust from the explosion at the supply depot had barely settled when the Deathworld shock troopers received word of their next mission. The victory over the Kryn on the outskirts of the supply base had invigorated the squad, but a fresh wave of danger was already brewing on the horizon. Back at their temporary base on Cerberus IV, Captain Alex Carter gathered his team for a debriefing. The room was buzzing with excitement from their recent triumph, but Alex knew that complacency could be their downfall. As he looked around the room, he saw a mix of pride and determination on the faces of his team. "Listen up, everyone. While we celebrated our success today, we have received alarming intelligence. Our scouts have reported that a larger Kryn fleet is en route to this sector. They've taken note of our activities and are coming back for revenge," Alex announced, his tone somber. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of facing a larger Kryn force was daunting, but she reminded herself of the skills they had honed together as a team. "How much time do we have before they arrive?" she asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Reports indicate that we have roughly 48 hours before they reach our position. We need to fortify our defenses and prepare for their attack. This time, they will not underestimate us," Alex replied, a fire igniting in his eyes. The team sprang into action, each member knowing their role in the preparations. The engineering team, led by Mia, set to work reinforcing their base's defenses, while others began scavenging supplies and weapons from the nearby area. As the hours passed, The tension in the base grew palpable. Each member of the shock troopers felt the weight of impending battle. Despite their recent victory, they were acutely aware that the Kryn would not come unprepared. During a brief lull, Alex pulled Mia aside. "I've been thinking about the Kryn's tactics. They're relentless, and I suspect they will employ new strategies this time. We need to outthink them," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I agree, Captain. Perhaps we can set traps or use diversion tactics to draw them away from our main position. They'll expect us to defend head-on," Maya suggested, her mind racing with possibilities. "Let's brainstorm some ideas and gather input from the others. We'll need every mind on this," Alex replied, feeling hopeful. As they discussed potential strategies, the team gathered around, contributing ideas and building a plan to lure the Kryn into a carefully crafted trap. Each suggestion was met with enthusiasm, and soon they had a solid outline for their defense. The next day, the shock troopers set up their defenses. They placed explosives at key points around their base, camouflaged them with debris, and created a series of decoys to mislead the Kryn. Each member felt the adrenaline surge as they worked, their trust in one another growing stronger. As night fell, they huddled together, sharing stories and laughing to ease the tension. Maya felt a sense of camaraderie among her team. They were not just soldiers but a family bound by the trials they had faced together. Just before dawn, an alarm sounded, shaking them from their rest. The Kryn fleet had arrived. Alex stood, adrenaline pumping as he rallied his team. "This is it, troopers. Prepare yourselves. Remember your training and trust each other. We've faced danger before, and we will face it again. Let's show the Kryn what we're made of." The shock troopers took their positions, weapons at the ready. The sound of ships approaching filled the air, and the sky was illuminated with the glow of enemy vessels. The Kryn had come in force, their ships hovering ominously above the base. As the enemy descended, Alex gave the signal, and the shock troopers activated their traps. Explosions erupted around the Kryn vessels, causing chaos and confusion in their ranks. "Now, troopers, engage," Alex shouted, leading the charge as they burst from their hiding places, weapons firing. The element of surprise was on their side, but the Kryn quickly regrouped, their fierce battle cries echoing across the battlefield. Mia found herself alongside Mark, who was focusing intently on the enemy. "We need to take out their command ship," Mark shouted over the noise. "If we can disrupt their leadership, we might throw them into disarray." "Good idea. Let's move," Maya replied, leading the way as they advanced toward the command ship. As they fought through waves of Kryn soldiers, they made their way closer to their target. Meanwhile, Alex coordinated the battle from a strategic vantage point. He could see the chaos unfolding, but he also knew they had to act quickly. "Keep pushing forward. Don't let them gain any ground," he urged his team. As Mia and Mark approached the command ship, they encountered a heavily fortified entrance. The Kryn guards were fierce, but they were determined to break through. "We need to create a diversion," Mia yelled, scanning the area. Mark nodded, throwing a grenade into a nearby group of enemies. The explosion sent debris flying, creating just enough distraction for Mia to slip inside the command ship. Once inside, Maya quickly located the control room. "I'll disable their communications," she called out, racing toward the main console. As she worked, she could hear the sounds of battle raging outside. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of Kryn soldiers stormed in. Maya's heart raced as she grabbed her weapon, firing at the intruders. She fought fiercely, determined to finish her task. Just as she managed to disable the communications, the Kryn soldiers were closing in on her. "Mia, we're coming," Mark shouted from the doorway, firing his weapon to cover her. With a final effort, Mia activated the self-destruct sequence on the command ship. "Let's get out of here," she yelled, sprinting toward the exit as explosions erupted behind her. Mark and Mia escaped just in time, joining Alex and the others outside. The command ship erupted in flames, signaling a significant blow against the Kryn. As the battle continued to rage on the gathering storm, the victory over the Kryn fleet had energized the Death World shock troopers, but Alex Carter felt a nagging sense of unease. The intelligence reports had suggested that the Kryn were not only ruthless, but also adaptive. They would learn from their defeat and likely return with even greater force. As the squad gathered in the makeshift war room to assess the aftermath of the battle, the mood was a mixture of celebration and caution. Mia, still buzzing from the adrenaline of combat, focused on the holomap projected in the center of the room. She noticed several red dots blinking ominously, representing the remaining Kryn forces in the sector. "Look at this," she said, pointing at the map. "These signals show that the Kryn are regrouping. They're consolidating their forces rather than retreating entirely." "Exactly," Alex replied, crossing his arms as he studied the redouts. "This isn't over. We need to anticipate their next move." Just then, Mark entered the room, a grim expression on his face. "I've just received a message from command. They want us to hold this position and prepare for further assaults. They're dispatching reinforcements, but we can't rely solely on them." "Let's brainstorm defensive strategies," Maya suggested, her mind already racing with ideas. "We should reinforce our perimeter and set up additional traps, maybe even employ guerrilla tactics. The Kryn are predictable once you know how they operate." The team nodded in agreement. Over the next few hours, they worked tirelessly, mapping out their defenses and preparing for the incoming threat. As they discussed strategies, Alex's mind wandered to his team's previous victories. Each success was a testament to their growth and resilience, but they had yet to face a challenge that could truly test their limits. Later that evening, as they took a moment to recharge, the atmosphere shifted. The realities of their situation settled in, and they reflected on the sacrifices they might have to make. "Mia, how are you holding up?" Alex asked, noticing her deep in thought. "I'm fine," she replied, but the weight in her voice told a different story. "It's just that every battle feels like it could be the last for one of us. I don't want to lose anyone." "We won't," Alex assured her. "We're stronger together, and we've already proven that. We have the skills and the will to face anything the Kryn throw at us." As the night wore on, they set watches and prepared for the impending battle. Exhaustion crept in, but sleep eluded them. Each member of the shock troopers wrestled with thoughts of their next fight, haunted by the knowledge that it could change everything. Dawn broke with an ominous stillness, the air thick with tension. Alex stood outside, gazing at the horizon where the Kryn were expected to appear. He knew that the moment of truth was near, and the choices they made now would determine their fates. Suddenly, alarms blared, snapping everyone into action. "They're here," Alex shouted, gathering his team. "Positions now." As the shock troopers fell into their battle stations, the ground shook beneath the weight of approaching Kryn forces. Alex's heart raced as he barked orders, adrenaline surging through his veins. The Kryn ships descended, looming like dark harbingers of doom. This time, they had come in overwhelming numbers. As the first wave landed, the shock troopers engaged them with fierce determination, their training kicking in as they fought for their lives. "Our tactic says," Mia found herself beside Mark, exchanging fire with a group of Kryn soldiers. "We need to draw them back to our traps," she yelled, ducking behind cover. "They can't be allowed to breach our defenses." Mark nodded, firing off a series of shots that took down a couple of Kryn. "Let's move. We can't let them push us back." The battle raged on, with explosions shaking the ground and gunfire echoing across the landscape. The shock troopers executed their plan, drawing the Kryn into carefully laid traps. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the enemy ranks, causing disarray and confusion. But the Kryn were relentless. They adapted quickly, changing they pushed forward, refusing to relent. Alex fought alongside his team, moving from one front to another, encouraging them and keeping morale high. "Stay together. Don't let them split us up," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The shock troopers fought valiantly, using every weapon at their disposal, but they quickly realized the Kryn were not only seeking revenge. They were prepared for war. As the battle wore on, the Kryn began to overwhelm the defenses, pushing closer to the core of the shock troopers' position. Alex knew they needed to take drastic measures. "We have to fall back to the inner perimeter," he ordered. "We'll create a last line of defense." The team regrouped, moving quickly as they retreated to their fallback point. There, they established a defensive line, preparing for one final stand. Alex could see the fatigue in his team's eyes, but he also saw the fire of determination. As the Kryn forces pressed in, Alex shouted, "Remember why we fight. For each other, for our home. We are the Death World Shock Troopers, and we will not be defeated." With a renewed sense of purpose, the shock troopers prepared for the onslaught. They stood united, ready to face whatever the Kryn had in store. The battle had become a brutal test of will, but they were determined to protect their own and push back against the encroaching darkness. The first wave crashed against their defenses, but the shock troopers held firm. Every shot counted, every move mattered. Together, they unleashed their fury, fighting with everything they had. As the tide of battle surged around them, they embodied the spirit of resilience that defined them as warriors. But deep down, they all knew this was only the beginning. The true test lay ahead, and the fate of the shock troopers, and perhaps the galaxy, hung in the balance. The last stand. The battle had turned into a nightmarish spectacle, each moment stretching into an eternity. The Death World shock troopers fought valiantly, but the sheer ferocity of the Kryn onslaught was unlike anything they had encountered before. As the Kryn pressed forward, the shock troopers had to dig deep into their reserves of strength and courage. Alex Carter led his team with fierce determination, pushing them to hold their ground against the relentless tide. The sounds of battle filled the air, the sharp crack of gunfire, the thunderous explosions of grenades, and the anguished cries of the fallen. It was chaos. But amidst the disorder, Alex found a sense of clarity. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of humanity. "Mia," Alex shouted, spotting her across the field. "Cover me. I'm moving to that flank." "Got it," she replied, her eyes steady and focused. She fired at a group of advancing Kryn soldiers, creating an opening for Alex to maneuver. He sprinted to the side, dodging enemy fire as he took cover behind a crumbling wall. As he peered over the rubble, Alex saw a group of Kryn preparing to overwhelm Mia's position. "No," he thought, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Without a second thought, he raised his weapon and fired, taking down two of the aliens before they could reach her. "Thanks, Alex," Mia shouted back, her voice a mix of relief and gratitude. But their reprieve was short-lived. The Kryn were adjusting, sending in heavier units armed with advanced weaponry. They began to breach the inner perimeter, overwhelming the shock troopers with their sheer numbers. "Fall back to the last line," Alex ordered, rallying his team. They retreated to the final defensive position, a narrow canyon surrounded by natural barriers that offered some protection. Here, they would make their stand. As they settled into their new defensive line, Mark checked their ammunition supplies. "We don't have much left, Alex. If we run out, we're done for." "We'll make every shot count," Alex replied, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the battlefield. "We need to hold them here. This is it." The first wave of Kryn crashed into their defenses, and the shock troopers unleashed a torrent of fire. The canyon echoed with the sound of battle, but their ranks began to dwindle as the Kryn pushed through, determined to crush their opponents. Mia fought beside Mark, her breath coming in quick gasps as they worked seamlessly together. "We have to hold the left flank," she cried, firing rapidly. "They're breaking through." "I see them," Mark replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. He moved to reinforce her position, covering her as she reloaded. Together, they fought back the wave, their hearts pounding with adrenaline and fear. But the Kryn were relentless. They continued to advance, and soon the shock troopers found themselves surrounded on all sides. With each passing moment, it became clearer that they were losing ground. "Alex, we can't keep this up," Mia shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "We can't give up," he shouted back, rallying the remaining troopers. "Remember our training. We're stronger together." Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the canyon. Alex turned just in time to see one of their key positions crumble, sending debris flying and blocking their line of sight. The chaos made it harder to maintain their formation, and the Kryn seized the opportunity, charging in with renewed vigor. In the midst of the chaos, Alex felt a surge of desperation. He glanced at his comrades, each one fighting bravely, but he knew they were running out of options. "We have to break their lines," he yelled, formulating a plan. "We need to take the fight to them." With steely resolve, Alex rallied his team, leading them in a countercharge against the advancing Kryn. "For humanity," he roared, leading the way as they pushed forward into the fray. The shock troopers fought tooth and nail, their training and camaraderie shining through. They held nothing back, pushing deeper into the ranks of the Kryn, surprising them with their ferocity. As they clashed, Alex felt a renewed sense of hope. They might be outnumbered, but they were far from defeated. However, just when it seemed they might turn the tide, the Kryn unleashed their own secret weapon, an enormous war machine, towering over the battlefield. Its massive frame gleamed ominously in the light as it advanced toward their position, sending tremors through the ground with every step. "Fall back! Fall back!" Alex shouted, but it was too late. The war machine unleashed a barrage of firepower that ripped through the ranks of the shock troopers, scattering them like leaves in a storm. "Alex," Mia cried out, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "What do we do? We have to disable that thing. If we don't, we'll be overrun," he shouted, desperation fueling his words. "We need to distract it while we find a way to bring it down." Gathering his remaining strength, Alex led a small group toward the war machine, weaving through the chaos. He felt every ounce of fear and doubt, but he pushed it aside. They were the shock troopers, forged in the fires of battle. They would not go down without a fight. As they approached the colossal machine, Alex spotted a weak point, a cluster of exposed cables running along its base. "That's it. We can hit that and take it down," he yelled to his squad. The team regrouped, and with a series of coordinated attacks, they focused their fire on the weak point. Bullets ricocheted off the machine's armor, but they pressed on, determination fueling their every move. The war machine shuddered under the barrage, smoke rising from the damaged area. Alex could see it was working. "Keep firing. We're almost there." Just then, the Kryn soldiers began to regroup, realizing what the shock troopers were doing. They surged forward, but Alex and his team remained focused, giving it everything they had. With one final push, Alex aimed his weapon and fired. The shot hit true, and the explosion sent a shockwave through the battlefield. The war machine staggered, smoke billowing from the exposed cables before it finally collapsed to the ground with a deafening crash. The shock troopers erupted into cheers, but Alex knew their fight was far from over. The Kryn were regrouping for one last push, and they needed to brace themselves for the final onslaught. As the remaining Kryn forces charged in, Alex stood at the forefront, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "For humanity. For our fallen comrades," he shouted, rallying his team for one last stand. With hearts filled with courage and determination, the Death World shock troopers charged forward, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they would confront the storm, embodying the spirit of resilience that defined them as warriors. They would fight, they would struggle, and they would emerge victorious, whatever the cost.